Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Ironically Serious. It's your host, Taylor Hedden. Thank you for joining me for another week. I have to give myself kudos because one of I wouldn't even have called it a resolution, but one of my goals this year was to stay consistent with this podcast and grow it. And I know it's going to take a lot of love. It's going to take a lot of up leveling, which I'm working on. One of those things being I am officially turning my office, which I'm currently sitting in, into a podcasting room and office. Right now, it's working. I mean, it's a great office. I've got plenty of space. My family allows me to use this room as my cave, is what we call it, even though it's not dark, but I'll often come up here for hours and just not come out. And it's very cozy. I've got a couch. That's where I record the podcast on right now. I've got a great desk. Last year, I invested for the first time ever in a real good desk. I had been using this Target desk and it was fine, but it was getting old and lots of scratches and it just wasn't very versatile. And I got one of those standing desks on Amazon. I'll actually link it in the description because it has changed my work life. I don't know why, but sometimes I feel like when I'm standing, especially if I'm doing a training or I'm on a Zoom call or just on camera and I'm actually standing, I just feel so much more confident versus sitting at my desk, like hunched over in the corner. So this desk has been amazing because it's the automatic standing desk. It goes up, it goes down, it's pre-saved, and it's a glass top. So you can write expo markers on it and take notes on it, which is so badass. So I really love the vibe right now, but the podcasting setup is very much rigged, you could say. I mean, we're doing a lot better because for those of you who saw on Instagram, I just got a new computer, which is a story in and of itself that I'll tell you in a second. So I feel like this being the first episode that I've recorded on this new laptop, the camera quality is so much better. I also feel like the audio quality, the mic is new, but for some reason, I think just because the new MacBook Pro is so fast and obviously just way more advanced than the 10-year-old dinosaur I was working on, somehow the audio is just really, really good. And so it's not bad, but it's not official and professional. And so I'm investing a little bit and trying to create a really cool space where I can have guests come to my house and record in person, which is also amazing because I obviously record a lot of solo episodes and do education online. So having a real space, like a production space, will be so badass. So I'm trying to figure it out and workshop how I can make this room a studio slash office. And I even found these, I'll link these too, because I think this is so cool. We rent our house. So there's not a lot of real changes I can do where I'm permanently, damaging the walls or painting. So we kind of have to get creative, but we are going to be living here another 2 years. We just re-signed our extension, or we just signed another lease with our extension. And so we're going to be in this house another 2 years. We've been here 2 years already. We love this house. But, I mean, there's plenty of things I wish I could do if I was a homeowner. But I did find these, they're almost like these sticky fluted backings. That is probably the worst description ever. I need my handy woman friend Morgan, who listens to this podcast, to explain what these are called. They're like slats, I think, but they're these sound absorbing slats, and they're also kind of decorative. So they dual purpose. They're decorative, they look really cool, but they also absorb sound. So they really help for rooms where you're going to be recording content or music or anything. And they just stick on the wall. Now, I don't know how bad the paint damage would be if we remove them, because you can remove them. So, they're temporary essentially. And you buy them by the big piece. So you just put them on the wall, stick them on, and it looks like you have wood slats on the wall. Because I don't know if you can tell from the video if you're watching on YouTube, but our wall is just like the typical builder grade splatter textured wall. And we can't paint. So I think this is a great solution. Getting some chairs. I'm going to sell this old couch that I've had for 5 years. And I'm going to create a freaking podcast studio. And I just want you guys to hear it right now. I know there's not a huge following on this podcast yet, but I have some really, really amazing people who are in the community and listeners and have been here from day one. And this summer will be year 3 of the podcast. And I'm just ready to take it to the next level and really invest in it. And what's crazy to me is it's a long game. It's not something that you just start a podcast and you start monetizing and it just blows up overnight. Even the podcasts that are doing well, I think monetization is hard, and it really takes a good podcast, a good topic, a good community to take it somewhere. And I wouldn't even say the goal is to monetize. I mean, it would be nice to monetize because obviously I invest time and money and energy into this. So monetizing would be awesome, being, getting sponsors or anything like that. But I think even just having more reach and more impact and being able to, for example, one of the things that's most exciting about investing into this studio in my house so I can podcast is having guests in real life and being able to interview and have real conversations that aren't just over Zoom. And with that reach and with that impact and with that growth, more guests with more knowledge and just a bigger audience to tap into for guests becomes more possible. And so, all that to be said, I'm feeling sentimental about the podcast. Some days it's hard. I edit, produce, and do this entire podcast myself. I was actually just talking to someone last night and they were like, "Oh, you run your own business, but it's just you." I was like, "Yeah, that's true." And the person said, "So you have a problem delegating?" I was like, "Dang, bro. You just shot one at me." But it's true. It's true. I do have a problem delegating. I like to be in control. And I think with something like the podcast where I am talking and oftentimes talking a lot, I want to have control over the final product. I want to be able to make sure the message I'm putting out is the right message. And also, I enjoy listening back because sometimes, more so when I'm doing a solo episode, I almost feel like I black out where I just get on this flow and I start talking and then it feels really good. I'll go into it with some topics, but then when I'm editing the episode, it's almost like I'm hearing it for the first time and being able to kind of process the messages and pick out, from that episode what's standing out and where I can pull clips. I'm just pumped about this podcast and everything in store. But speaking of the person who told me that I like to be in control, I was at a networking event last night. I shared, I think, a couple of episodes back. It was last year, really, that I joined a volunteer role with this organization called Texas Young Professionals. And it's essentially this really big network of Texas young professionals. You don't have to be young. I mean, the age gap is pretty big from, late 20s to 50s, I would say is probably the average, but it's a really big network and they have these chapters in all of the cities, Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth, and they do these events which are free for their members, and they're also affiliated with this app which is a networking app called Mingly. Now it sounds it sounds like a dating app. And if you go download this, you might want to tell your spouse what it is because if they see a Mingly notification, they're definitely going to think you're on a dating app because it kind of looks like a dating app. It's got the icon itself is it's really cool. Don't get me wrong. I love this. The icon itself is a little pin, but it's kind of shaped like a heart. And then the whole concept of the app is that you make business connections, but it's very similar to dating where you're swiping. And so you swipe right if it's someone you think you'd have a connection with. And the profiles are kind of like little LinkedIn profiles. People put their businesses and who they work for, and they have, professional headshots. And then they kind of put what they're looking for in this networking. Maybe they're looking for jobs, or they're looking to make collaborations, or they're looking for clients, or whatever it might be. But the cool thing is this app is a sponsor of the network, Texas Young Professionals. And so when you go to these events, the app is really cool because you can see everyone that was at the event that checked in. So you can remember who you spoke to and kind of remember their names. Now that I've gone to more networking events, especially in these more corporate type settings where it's not just a bunch of online TikTokers, I realized, people are handing out their card, and I sometimes will get 15 different cards by the end of the night. And I go home and I'm like, I don't remember who was who. And of course, I could go and look it up and do all of that. But it's really cool to go on the app and you can see, okay, here's Tommy, here's Susie, here's Savannah, all of these people I met with their credentials and who they work for. So then you can follow up. And I've made some really great connections, but it is interesting because it's very corporate. When I say corporate, it is, I am probably at every event I go to one of the only business owners, but also one of the only people who's in a very niche, like digital online space. And thankfully, I've grown so much in this business and my confidence that I know how to communicate in that kind of environment. I know how to explain what I do without saying, I have an online business. And they're like, what do you do? And you're like, I don't really know how to explain it. Or people just assume, I'm sure many of you guys feel this way, that if you do marketing online, you just post on Instagram. So I've gotten a lot more confident explaining what I do. But to give you context, the people at this event last night were people like commodity traders who trade carbon emissions and crude oil. You have these huge investment bankers. There was a guy who was a lawyer for bio and AI companies. So not only is he having to learn the actual technologies and the science, but then he has to learn how to argue it in the law. There was a girl who works for NASA and studies lunar exploration. I was just feeling, I'm like, I am dumb. I dropped out of college. I started a business. I have no idea what any of you guys are talking about, but it sounds awesome. And it's very interesting because most of these people are working in an office space or commuting, or most of them even live in the city. And I'm over here, the 29-year-old business owner driving in from the burbs, tattooed, piercings. And it's a very interesting environment to place yourself in niches and networks that you normally wouldn't be around, especially for us online business owners, because as we know, most of what we do is online. And when we do connect in person, we're going to a retreat or we're going to a conference with all of the other same people that do what we do. But how often are you inserting yourself into a group of people who do something so different than you? And it's very cool because I've kind of learned a lot, I would say, about different industries and the type of people in those environments and kind of how they operate. But then I also am just creating a network of people who I don't know if I'm ever going to need that connection or if I would ever need a job for them or if they would ever be a client, but you never know. You never know if who you meet or who you run into is the next person who's going to bring along an opportunity, or you never know when you might need that contact, or you never know when you might make a connection. And I think that's where I enjoy leading the most in that space as the director for our Houston chapter. I joined because I wanted to expose myself to different types of professionals, but I also wanted to continue to be a connector and expand my network. And I think that's something I've loved so much about this space online and the community I'm a part of in my business, because I'm always meeting people who are looking for this or looking for a service or they need this, or you just meet two people in different spaces and go, oh my gosh, these two people need to meet. They might be able to collab, or they might have an opportunity, or they might just be friends. And being that type of connector, it feels really good. I think also very much leaning into this sales psychology and networking psychology. When you're able to do something for someone without asking for anything in return and just doing it because you see the opportunity, there is a reciprocity happening where that person now is going to want to do something for you. And that is where I see networking being just a gold mine for business owners and entrepreneurs. If you are someone who has spent the last year working on your social media strategy and getting your website up and getting your brand photos done and investing in this, like that's all great. That's fantastic. You need that. But what kind of connections are you making? Are you spending the time to actually build connections that are two-way, not just you looking for a client or you trying to get help from someone else. What kind of spaces are you getting into where you're becoming the connector or you're becoming the person that can help the next one coming along? And it doesn't matter if you're brand new to this space and you're like, oh, but Taylor, I don't really know that much yet, or I don't have that many connections yet. It doesn't matter. You just never know who you're going to meet and the kind of relationship you can build when you purposefully connect and get outside of your comfort zone and network in ways that you don't normally. And I'm not saying you need to go to a mixer, although please come join me in Houston. If you're in Houston, would love to have you. Send me a DM and I'll tell you all the details. But it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be so official. And it can be as simple as signing up for some kind of online community where you're a part of a group and you get on a Zoom call and there's office hours. It could be going to a coffee networking event in your city or a chamber meeting. Or maybe it is joining some kind of group of professionals in your industry or your space, whatever it might be. There's so much out there, and I think as business owners, especially in the digital space where a lot of my listeners are falling as content creators and service providers and solopreneurs, you get so tunnel visioned. You just get to this place where it doesn't feel, at least for me, like the outside world is that real because I don't have an outside job. I don't have an office. I don't have a corporate job where there's hundreds and hundreds of people above me or even dozens of people above me. And so it's so easy to kind of forget how to do those things, how to network, how to have genuine conversation. And I'll be honest, even for me, someone who's very confident and feels very good in those situations, I even still get kind of nervous because I don't want to, no one wants to feel embarrassed and trip over their words or not know how to explain what they do. I mean, even yesterday, I was driving 45 minutes to this event and I had to turn the radio off and kind of talk through answers to questions I knew I would be asked because I'm kind of going through this. I've talked about this a couple times recently. I'm going through this pivot in my business and my brand. And part of that, I think, is this refinement and becoming a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more professional. I think it's just this evolution as a woman that I'm going through, and it's carrying over into my business with the type of clients. And so I wanted to answer in a more refined way and kind of practice it. So I'm literally sitting here. I was listening to Drake and then I was like, I can't think with Drake on. Love you, but can't listen. Turned it off. And I was just asking myself questions and responding back to those questions with the answers. But we all get nervous. We all feel, I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want to have to sit there and talk about myself or answer the same questions over and over. In fact, I want to give you a tip to you. If you are going to a networking event, here is a really cool thing to keep in mind. I think, actually, I know the question, what do you do, is it's so boring. It's so overused. It feels like speed dating. If you go to an event that's networking, you're probably answering that question 10 plus times. And you're going to say it a little bit different every time, but the conversation always kind of goes in the same direction, and it's just not super exciting to receive it, to ask it. You can also tell sometimes people are nervous and they don't feel super confident knowing how to explain what they do, or to be honest, maybe people just hate their job. Maybe they've had a really shitty week and they're like, the last thing I want to talk about right now is what I do. However, networking is about networking, and a lot of that is about your professional career. And so I experimented with this question last night and it popped off. It was so good. And the question was, and this is for someone you've never met and you're meeting them for the first time and introducing yourself, or this could even be for maybe someone you've met at a past event or in passing and you know what they do, but you want to have a good conversation starter. The question is, are there any projects or clients you're really excited about right now? And that is such a good question for a couple of reasons. One, if you don't know what they do, or maybe you forgot, like you met them and you're like, crap, I cannot remember what they do. Whatever their answer is will probably give you a hint or just tell you straight out what they do, right? Secondly, networking is all about communication. It's all about dialogue. And one of the marketing techniques slash theories slash ideas is that everyone is the hero of their own story. It is a message we hear in expert marketing from StoryBrand, Donald Miller, through sales psychology, and all of the above when it comes to storytelling and communication, especially when it comes to selling, making someone the hero of their story is a game changer because you now because you now take yourself out of the story and they become the main character and you become a supporting role, literally. And it might feel backwards because usually we're in the headspace of ourselves and we have big egos and it's about us and what can I get out of this? But when you start to switch it into what can I provide for them? How can I support them? You really see people. It's a 180. You see people connect differently. You see them respond differently. And going back to that reciprocity, when you really focus on them and give them value of some kind, they want to return that favor. And so asking that question, what are you really excited about? It gets people excited about the answer. And all of a sudden, you kind of see that switch flip. They're excited, maybe they're glowing, they're laughing, they're telling you a win. You can celebrate that. Last night I asked that question and I had no idea who this guy was. He was in a nice suit and he said, I'm about to send out 2 engagement letters this week and I really hope I get them. And I said, that's amazing for what kind of service? And he said, I'm a lawyer. And everyone around was like, that's awesome. Congrats. And you could just see there was a level of confidence that just kind of lit up in him. And we were able to send him on his way at the end of the night. It was so great to meet you, Mike. Really hope you get those engagement letters. Best of luck, man. Hope we can talk about it at the next event and celebrate. And he left with a smile on his face and he felt so good. And not only is he probably going to return to an event because he had a great experience, but he's going to remember that conversation. He's going to remember that dialogue. And even if you don't get anything out of it, that conversation those types of conversation are so much more fun to be a part of when there's actual meat to it and a little emotion. It sucks to be meeting someone, you guys are talking about the traffic patterns. It's like no one wants to go network and talk about the weather. Excuse me, my Siri just interrupted me. I realized I never stopped my outdoor walk, so it's just been going for 40 minutes even though I only walked for 8 minutes. So, anyways, let this be your sign to go network. Now, I actually have a tip. I didn't mean for this podcast episode to be all about networking, but here we are. I do have a tip for those of you who do not get out much, and for those of you who market on social media, specifically Instagram. Here's a really great tip for networking and connection building and dialogue. I've been doing this now for a couple of months, and I can't say I created this idea. I think I saw it somewhere or someone told me that they do this and it worked well for them. And so I started implementing it. And I'll preface this by saying I don't have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers on Instagram. I don't get hundreds of new followers every day. It's very manageable. My account, I'm able to really have great conversations because I'm not dealing with huge numbers. So if you are someone who has, you're getting hundreds of new followers every day, or you have hundreds of DMs all the time you need to go through, this might not be super applicable, but I think for a lot of us, this could really apply. So once or twice a week, I will go onto my Instagram. That's the primary platform I use. And I will go through the new followers that I got that week. I'll go to their profile, take a look at their profile, look at what they do. If they have a business name, I'll try to find their real first name. And then I will send them a personal voice note in the DMs. And the voice note part is important, but I'll send them a voice note and I'll introduce myself. I'll say, hi, I'm Taylor. I'm the owner of Chanel and Lee. People often think my name is Chanel, so I'll clarify that right away. I'll tell them I'm so excited they found me. And I always make an effort to, one, give a good compliment, a genuine compliment. Maybe there's a piece of content I loved. Maybe I love their branding or a photo or some of their work. And then I will also try to find some kind of connecting point. Maybe we're in the same location. Maybe we follow some of the same people, or we're in the same industry, or maybe we just have something super random in common, like they're a mom of a boy, or we have the same love for Drake. I don't know, whatever it might be. And in that voice note, it's not long, it's usually a minute. I'll just mention that. And then I'll end the voice note with a question. So usually I'll ask more about what they do or get a specific answer to something that I want to know more about. And I'll always ask them where they found me or, why they followed my content or my page. And it is so incredible how many people respond. And some people respond with voice notes, some don't. Totally get it. Not everyone is a voice note person. Regardless of how they respond, people are always shocked that someone took the time to send them such a personal message, especially on social media, where many of us were following a creator, we're following a business owner, we're following someone we look up to, and we don't expect them to send us a message out of the blue, especially if we're not initiating the conversation. So people are always shocked and they feel very seen. They feel like it's such a thoughtful gesture. And again, going back to dialogue being everything, it opens up dialogue. They feel a connection. The compliment feels good. The connection feels like it's not just a selfish message. Hi, I'm Taylor. I set up Dubsado. Let me know if you need anything. Like that's nobody likes that. That's cold pitching. That's that's 2025. We're not doing that here. We're trying to make connections. And it's not that hard. It's really, really not. And, sometimes those conversations don't go much. They don't really go anywhere. Maybe there's a couple messages here or there. Sometimes people don't respond at all, and that's totally fine. I get it. Sometimes you're just scrolling and following people, or maybe you don't have anything to say, or maybe you're super anxious and you don't even know. Or maybe they just don't like me. I don't know. But a lot of people do respond, and that's the point. And I have seen some really cool conversations come from that. I've seen people book discovery calls because of that. I've seen people who just interact with my content so much more than if I were to not message people. I kind of looked at it prior to doing that. I would get a lot of followers, but I wouldn't see really a tick in engagement. And then when I started doing that, I would see people engaging, especially with my stories, a lot more. But I'm getting better about posting my feed, but my stories for sure. So, a little idea for you. Go out this week and, it's Friday, send a couple of messages and make someone's day and make some connections. It's funny because last night I switching gears to talk about something embarrassing because I love to be embarrassed. I mean, truly love to be embarrassed. I don't know why I always embarrass myself and do the silliest things. This wasn't really something I did though, but I felt embarrassed in the moment. I was talking with someone last night and they asked me about my job. And we were chatting, and it was this guy. I can't really remember what he did. I think he was the guy that did the commodity trading. And we're talking, and he asked me about my business and how I came into this industry. And I kind of mentioned how my background was in arts, and then I worked for a nonprofit and then an agency, and so on and so forth. And clearly, I wear my ring on my finger. So he asked me, he said, "You're married, you look very young." And he asked me where I met my husband. And I said, I actually met him at a club where I bartended. And hear me out. I'm not ashamed of my life story. I'm not ashamed of it because I've come to realize what I did when I was 21 to 22. We don't need to talk about it necessarily because the things that I did and the things that I saw could go into a book truly from just I think my mom might listen to this podcast sometimes, so I don't want to get too much into it. But let's just say I saw some things, okay? And for those of you who don't know, maybe you're new here, I worked at a strip club for about a year. I was not a stripper. Love them though. No shame to strippers. Big fan. I was a bartender and I came from nightclubs. So after my divorce, when I exited the cult, I'd been working at the church that I was a part of, got a job at Nordstrom. And while I was working at Nordstrom, I was obviously partying my ass off. And I thought, well, what better idea than to get paid to party, AKA become a bottle girl and then become a bartender so you can just party, but you're making money while you're partying. It was super smart at the time, okay? I thought to myself, also, you become best friends with the industry, people let you in for free, they give you free drinks. It's just a smart business move if you love to party and you have work ethic. So, I was cocktailing. I was a bottle girl. Can you tell? Like bottle girl. Not ashamed to say that. And in that process, I then realized I was making way more money at the clubs than at Nordstrom, quit the Nordstrom job, started working full time at the strip club as a bartender. I started as a waitress, ended up as a bartender, one of the best bartenders, and that's where I met my husband. And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed to tell people. But normally, in a professional environment, especially when you're meeting new people, you don't lead with that. You don't lead with the things in your past that are a little questionable, that most people see as, a little red flag. So I don't just come out of the woodwork and say those things. I don't just say, "Where did you meet your husband?" I don't just respond to the question, "Where did you meet your husband?" with the strip club. There were some tits behind us at the time. I don't say that. However, I do just tell people we met at a bar. We met at a bar. It was great, whatever. So I said that. And they asked, what was the name of it? And it works out well because, again, I don't want to lie, but you also can't really avoid the question. And I'll usually say, oh, it doesn't exist anymore. And the person said, I've lived here for a long time. What was the name? Thankfully, the name of the club I worked at has changed names since I worked there. And the previous name was, it was decent. It sounded like a bar. It was called Scores. Shout out to Scores circa 2018, 2017. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that place. The experiences I had at that place are just Okay, I'll have to just tell you this story really quick and then I'll get back to why it was so embarrassing. One time when I was at Scores, we got raided by the SWAT, you guys. We got raided by the actual SWAT team of America, whatever the name of that is, full on armor, full on truck, suits, the whole 9 yards. It was so terrifying. And it was so weird. It was during the day, not during the day, but it was like 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. We were about to get a shift change going on. The girls were coming in. I think it was a Thursday. So it wasn't like anything crazy going on. And these four guys come in. They've got baseball caps. They're just wearing jeans and t-shirts. And they sit down at this table. They wave this girl over. She's whispering something in their ear. I think one of the waitresses brings him a drink or the guys a drink. I was a bartender at the time, so I'm behind the bar and they're sitting at a table. And they say, hey, we're going to go outside and take a smoke because you could smoke outside on the patio. They go out the front door and not even 5 minutes later, they bust in, turn all the lights on. They're wearing full on bulletproof vest. They have the hats. They did a complete, I don't know, character change. It said SWAT on the back. A guy's holding a machine gun, or what I thought was a machine gun. I don't know. And made every single dancer line up on the stage, checked everyone's IDs to make sure there weren't any underage girls there. We had to get our TABC license out. I mean, it was so terrifying. And there was like some customers in the back, like, do we leave? Do we close our tab out? Are we in trouble? Like, what's going on? And then they checked everyone's stuff. They put the girl in handcuffs. Apparently, she was doing some shady things, put the girl in handcuffs, took her out in her little tiny string bikini, and put her ass in jail. And then they turned the lights off and we went back to business. They were just like, all right, get back to work. It was the craziest. My face, and I was like 22. My face was just, did that really just happen? 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock at my job on a Thursday? It did. Anyways, it's no longer called Scores. Now it's called Polecats, which I'm sorry, that is the most strip club name you've ever heard in your life. And this man asked me, what club was it? I say Scores. It's an old place. It doesn't exist anymore. It kind of sounds like a sports bar. And he goes, the Gentleman's Club. And I wanted to melt into my seat. I felt ashamed all of a sudden. Because here's why. I am not ashamed. It is what it is. It's part of the story. I met my husband there. He was there too. It is what it is. However, I feel like people immediately will judge me. And I feel like people think, oh, right, you were a bartender. Right, but it's true. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's a part of my story. I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to lie about it. I'm not going to brush it under the rug because if I'm being honest, I think that part of the story is so critical because it just shows you how fucking far I have come and how possible it is to go from not knowing anything about yourself and having no sense of direction and feeling just completely like a bag in the wind, being taken in whatever direction is going on and truly just not giving a fuck, to having purpose, having identity, stepping into all of these really amazing opportunities and characteristics and becoming a good mom and a good wife. It's just so insane how much we can change when we want to change. And I think that was the key, because at the time, before I met my husband, I didn't care. I was living my best life. I was young. I felt like I had spent all my teen years just trapped by religion. And I said, to hell with it. I'm going to party. I'm going to drink every day. I'm going to make this money. I'm going to live in an apartment in downtown, which was not nice whatsoever. But I was truly fearless. The world could not stop me. And thank God it did not, because homegirl could have went to jail for sure. Didn't go to jail. But when I met Josh, it's almost like opportunities, not even opportunities. It's almost like my future started to become something that I could really see. And I could see this person that I knew I could become and this woman that I really wanted to become. And all of a sudden, those desires just started to shift. And I listened to it. I listened to it, and it wasn't easy. There was so many moments in the beginning of our relationship and when I started this business and became a VA where it was so hard. It was so hard to break old habits and old identities and to just step into something that requires more. It really does. The life that I'm living, it requires more discipline, it requires more energy, it requires more trust, knowing that I am putting the work in to become who I want to become. It requires vision and understanding what is that life I want to live and how can I get there and how can I think bigger and dream bigger. And there's nothing more, I wouldn't say satisfying, because this doesn't satisfy me, but it encourages me to be better. And I don't know if this is just that dog in me. When I see people who I was partying with 10 years ago and they're doing the same thing, and I go, dang, like I can look at my life and say, I'm making moves. I'm not perfect. And a lot of times I'm making 2 moves forward, 1 move back, 6 moves forward, 3 moves back, 1 to the right, left, turn around. Like it's never a perfect journey, but I'm trying, and I'm not okay with just being mediocre and living a mediocre life and not experiencing the full width of growth and grit and going to uncomfortable places so I can then relish in what I earn when I get to the other side of that uncomfortable place. It's incredible. It's almost addicting. And I think as that type A personality overachiever, it really becomes something that you crave and crave. And that's why I think this year is going to be something incredible, because I got so comfortable last year to where I stopped listening to that voice that's like, okay, let's go. Let's keep moving. Let's keep building. Let's keep adding. And I got kind of comfortable. And nights like last night where I have to tell my story, and as wild and ridiculous as it is at times, it just shows me I'm only scratching the surface. And so are you. Wherever you're at right now in the journey, there is so much to uncover. You have so much potential. There's so much in you left to build and work on and dig out. And if you can just take a second in all of the frustration of your day or the unsatisfaction or just all of the shit that we have going on 24/7, if you can just take a second to pause, ground yourself, and look back at who you were 5 years ago, 6 years ago, how far you've come, and appreciate that for just a second, let that simmer and use that confidence to do it again and do it again and keep going. If you are dreaming about something bigger, it's not a coincidence. If you wake up and you're that person who's like, I know I am meant for big things, or I know I can become this, or I desire this thing so much. That's not a coincidence. You don't just desire that because you think you want it. There are times where we're desiring things that aren't aligned with us, and that's because we don't have clarity, or we're not listening to intuition, we don't have self-awareness. But a lot of times the things we desire are there because we know we have the potential to have them and to receive them and to become them. And again, it's not easy and it's not often fun, but it's possible. So, a little encouragement for you, because every time I go to a networking event and I get to talk about my business and I get to even just see the shift and the growth I've had in my professional career over the last 6 years, even just down to how I talk to people, you start to see that all of the time that you're putting in, it really, really means something. And even the days where it feels like you're not moving the needle and you're just doing the same thing and you're grinding and you're showing up, all of that is adding. All of that is a part of the process, a part of the refinement, a part of the discovery. And that is the beautiful thing about it. That really is the beautiful part of the journey. And woo, I just got a little deep. We just went networking, and it's funny because I have a list right next to me, and none of those things, I mean, networking is on there, but none of the other things that I just talked about were on there. But I don't know, maybe you needed to hear that message today. Maybe you needed to get the little push in your tush to go out and network and put yourself out there. Maybe you needed the encouragement to not be ashamed of your past, or maybe you just needed the reminder that the work you're doing is meaningful. The work on yourself, the work in your business, the work on your relationships. It's all meaningful. And I'm here. I'm cheering you on. I'm cheering myself on. And as always, I'm so glad that you made it to the end of this episode and got to hear that message. And hopefully I'll see you at a TYP event. If not, I would love to stay connected at Ironically Serious Pod. You can also follow me at Chanel and Lee. All the links are in the description. And if you love this episode, please share it with a friend. We're available anywhere you get your podcast. And head to ironicallyserious.com. There are some great resources there. You can see all of our past episodes and timestamps, and you can submit a question, an SOS. Got a problem? Need some advice? Drop an SOS. It's anonymous, and I will give you a little bit of tailored advice on the next episode. I'll see you guys right here next Friday.